Louis Dumas is Canada's ambassador to Egypt. He is in Cairo. Ambassador, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you've seen the statement from Israel's Prime Minister criticizing our Prime Minister for the comments he made yesterday, with Prime Minister Netanyahu insisting Israel does everything to keep civilians out of harm's way, and that it's Hamas's fault so many people are dying because civilians are being used as human shields. What is your sense on Israel's claim that it is doing everything it can to keep civilians out of harm's way? Is that what the people are telling you as they come out of Gaza?
It's an extremely complex conflict. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. It's deep-rooted. It's a lot of emotions involved in this. I think there's also a lot of finger-pointing on both sides. But I think if we can take a step back as a country, and Canada is a well-respected ally in the region, I think it's time for a bit of humanity in our reflection about this conflict. We see people suffering on both sides. We see atrocities on both sides. I think, it's time to take I would say a pause. And as we have been advocating for humanitarian pauses, I think it's time to have a pause and just reflect about the whole thing.
You deal with Israel in your efforts to get Canadians and their families and permanent residents out of Gaza. They play a key role in vetting the lists of foreign nationals that would be allowed to leave. Any concerns that this flare-up between the two prime ministers, with Mr. Netanyahu criticizing Mr. Trudeau, could affect those operations?
Not necessarily. I think, it's like having a good friend and disagreeing on different matters. I think there's great respect still between, the two countries. And certainly looking at it here from Egypt, I think Canada is a respected partner in the region. So at the end of the day, I mean, as you point out, it's Israel and Egypt that control the attribution of spots, of names on the list. And while it's not in our control, I mean, we do everything in our zone of influence to make sure that more Canadians are on the list. We still have 250 people, Canadians, permanent residents and family members to bring from Gaza into Egypt, and we're totally committed at making sure they come home.
There was no Canadians on the list now today. I think it's been a couple of days, so you did have that one very successful day when you got more than 200 people out in one day. Why no Canadians on the list right now? What's the reason for that?
Well, we had 2 Canadians today, so there's a few individuals who were on previous lists that did manage to come through today. So we had 2 today. So in total, we have welcomed 356 Canadian permanent residents and family members to Egypt. As I said, there's approximately 250 to go. I think we have to acknowledge as well, there's a number of countries, vying for a favorable position to get on the list, approximately 60 countries. At the beginning of the operation, there was about 7,500 foreign nationals. So the fact that we've managed to get approximately 60% of the total Canadians, from Gaza into Egypt, I think it's very reassuring. So as I said, we're committed to bring each and every of those individuals to Canada. And this is my commitment here from Cairo.
So do you have a sense, sir, on when the next big group of Canadians or a more regular departure of Canadians might begin? Because there's, say, about 250 people, so still a sizable cohort in there.
That's correct. We don't have a sense of when at this point, but we work very closely with the Israeli authorities. The Canadian Embassy in Tel Aviv is extremely active. Our office in Ramallah as well is also involved in the negotiations. I mean, here in Egypt, we talk on almost hourly with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We try to influence as much as possible. But in preparation for that, we have a team in Rafah at the moment, waiting patiently for Canadians to arrive, working with other nations. As soon as we have individual crossing, we can send them to Cairo and onwards, hopefully, to Canada.
There's been some frustration and criticism from families that it's taken so long. Understandably, their emotions are running high because of this. A lot of them are blaming Canada for the delays. Why has it taken so long? I mean, obviously, it's a complex thing with a lot of competing interests. What has been the biggest issue, do you think, in terms of getting all the Canadian spots on that list so they can get out?
Well, we have to recognize, first and foremost, that we're dealing with a zone of extreme conflict. a place where bomb explode, where shots are fired. It is extremely, extremely difficult to get these individuals out of Gaza. I think, there was no, I would say, lack of effort on the part of Canada. It is a complex situation. But let me assure you, as soon as we could, have influence on the matter and bring, as I said, Canadians, permanent residents and family members out of Gaza into Egypt, so we can allow them to, move on with their lives, find a bit of peace, and possibly, start, their life again in Canada. We did so. And I have to recognize, as I've mentioned before, the efforts done by our embassies, in the region, our offices in the region, the folks in Canada who've been working 24/7 on this issue. I think, to say that Canada has been lagging behind, I would take it with a grain of salt, to be frank with you. I think, we've done everything we can, and we're still committed. Looking ahead, we're still committed at bringing the remaining 250 individuals from Gaza into Egypt.
I've spoken with some people here in Canada who are working on this particular operation, and they tell me that there have been dozens of people who've been offered a chance to get on the list, to get out, but because the family members they have in Gaza are unable to leave because of their citizenship status, they've chosen to stay, even though they had a path to safety through Rafah into Egypt. How many Canadians or people potentially that Canada could have gotten on the list have opted to stay in Gaza for those reasons?
That number we don't know. It's but one thing I can say, however, those are very difficult decisions. I can only imagine people having lives in Gaza, having to decide whether to leave family members behind, having to make tough choices. It is very difficult. But from a Canadian perspective, from the government of Canada's perspective, we have to offer them a path to safety. We have to offer them a solution to continue their lives in a different context. And but I know for a fact those are heartbreaking decisions. When we talk to evacuees here in Cairo, people are really are torn by the decisions they have to make. So we try to give them comfort, give them a space for reflection, and help them, as much as possible with the road ahead.
All of the competing interests, as we've discussed, other countries trying to get on the list, limited access and entry points. Julie Sunday, who is the top bureaucrat working on this file, your colleague, she said this whole experience has been, in her words, profoundly frustrating. Is that how you're feeling right now, Ambassador?
I think, I was at the interview when Madame Sunday said that, and I said it's been difficult. Frustrating is certainly an adjective that could be used, but I would say difficult, because we have to remember that not only do we have to get people out of a zone of conflict, then we have to take them from Rafah to Cairo on a road that takes usually about 8 to 10 hours, and through a zone that has been where we have told Canadians not to go to for the past 10 years. It's a very dangerous area of Egypt, and I have to commend, the Egyptian forces at securing the corridor between Rafah and Cairo, but it's very difficult. I cannot underestimate, the difficulties that we're facing. But I take great, I would say, great pride and great satisfaction in having 356 of the 600 Canadian permanent residents and family members out of Gaza. But still, we still have work to be done. Still have 250 people to bring out, and we're absolutely committed to that.
Louis Dumas, Canada's ambassador to Egypt, thank you for your time today, sir.
Thank you very much.